Spoiling it! You're spoiling everything!
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I'll be honest, I really wasn't expecting this movie to make it on my end of the year list. But sometimes you just watch the right movie at the right time, and that is exactly what happened to me. This movie hit me at the perfect time and was everything that I was looking for, especially in a superhero movie. I'm a big fan of closing chapters. I mean, my favorite book ever made is The Last Olympian, my favorite comic book movie is Logan, and my favorite episode of Velma is the season finale. Getting closure on all these characters' arcs is really just magnificent. In particular, Star-Lord and the way that they ended his journey is my personal favorite, mostly because Peter Quill is my favorite character in the MCU. And yes, I know he's gonna come back for Secret Wars or whatever, but alright, just let me have this for a little while. And really, finality is the best word I can use to describe this movie, because that's really what it felt like. It felt like the final chapter of the MCU. Not the big, spectacular send-off like Endgame, but more so just the final closing of the curtain. Seeing the end journey to a bunch of characters that I've loved to see without seeing any of them have to die in very dramatic ways. Yeah, I won't lie, there was about 3 times when I watched this movie for the first time where I was 100% certain Drax was gonna die. I love all the little things too, like Peter and Gamora's relationship and how it's less about them falling in love and more so about accepting people for who they are. I'm happy that she doesn't have an ending where she turns away from the Ravagers and becomes like Gamora 1, but just stays true to who she is because that's who she is. I like seeing Nathan Fillion and the weird fleshlight world. Ultimately, I just loved everything in this movie. It may just go down as my favorite MCU movie. I don't know, I'm gonna have to let it simmer for a little while longer, but it's well on its track to being that. And with this movie's financial and critical success, I think it's safe to say that DC is in good hands. Jamie Boy seriously needs to finish getting all that crap out of his system before he can start actually making good movies. Oh, and just for the record, I thought Blue Beetle was fine. I thought it was cute.
I thought Sandy was the boom operator.
Did somebody say boom?
Oppenheimer. I mean, really, what can I say that hasn't already been said? This is an epic movie made to rival the likes of Lawrence of Arabia or Citizen Kane. A movie so large in scope, it's hard to imagine it ending. Its cast, crews, sets, settings, even its runtime is so grand. This is the kind of movie that Disney wants to make every time they release a blockbuster. A movie so big and expansive that if you didn't go and see it, you were considered a loser in high school. Everything about this movie just works. Small-scale performances to Cillian Murphy's probably Oscar-winning performance. Rising action that doesn't stop rising until there's one final shot that the entire movie has been building up to. And thoroughly powerful character writing that deconstructs and understands the characters that it is trying to portray. Honestly, I can't add anything to the conversation around this movie. I'm probably just gonna keep falling back into random buzzwords to make myself sound smart. You know, like what I've been doing the entire time I've been talking about this movie. While I may still gain more enjoyment out of films like Inception or The Dark Knight, I can't deny that this film is Christopher Nolan's magnum opus. This is the film that his entire career has been building up to, a film so large in scale, so grand, that it almost feels like it could never have been made by a single filmmaker.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.
The Holdovers. Talk about a perfect classic movie in a perfect return to form of 70s and 80s cinema. A heartfelt Christmas movie unlike any other I've really ever seen, with how it portrays such a lighthearted and joyous theme through such a cynical narrative. Paul Giamatti is why this movie works. Even more so than any other movie I've seen, maybe in my entire life, his performance is the most important part of this movie. If the character of Paul Hunnam does not work, then the movie does not work. In a similar way, the performances of Dominic Sessa and Davine Joy Randolph are just as important. These three are the movie, because all this movie is character. There is no plot, there is no suspense, there is no rising action. There is just characters. There is no writing, there is only character writing. The only thing The Holdovers is about is characters, and seeing real people going through shit. 3 real people that couldn't be more different, all left alone during the happiest time of the year. all done to show that it can be the most unlikely places and the most unlikely people that can truly affect you and understand you. And while yes, you can say that this movie is just 2 hours of 3 people being sad at Christmas time, but there's something strangely human about that. This is a movie I'll watch for the rest of my life around Christmas time, because this is one of the only movies ever made that truly understands what it's like to be alone during the happiest time of the year. But as long as you look hard enough and are lucky enough, you can always find some place to belong. This is the most heartfelt movie that has come out all year. A movie so beautiful and so perfect that it almost makes me feel just a little too human when I watch it. Lastly, I'd just like to make a note for all of the people out there who constantly complain about why movies aren't made like they used to. You know, why do we only get sequels and remakes and reboots instead of good original content like we did in the 80s? You know, anything that was like a classic. My guy, this has been sitting here since November. And if you don't want to watch it, or you don't like it, or it's not your cup of tea, you know what, that's fine. To each their own, everybody has their opinions. But what you can't do is you can't sit there and complain about movies like this not being made when you don't support movies like this. If the only movies that are making money are sequels or remakes or reboots, those are the only movies that are gonna get made. So vote with your wallets, folks, and support the holdovers.
Poisoned food! Oh, no! Poisoned food, my one weakness.
Killers of the Flower Moon. So I'm not a big Scorsese head. I mean, I like movies like Goodfellas or Raging Bull, but there was something so hauntingly beautiful about Killers of the Flower Moon. I said the same thing about The Holdovers, but Killers of the Flower Moon really did make me feel just a little too human. But rather than that being a positive thing that uplifts this movie and makes its heartfelt message much sweeter, Killers of the Flower Moon is just incredibly tragic. There's something so evil about the characters in this movie, an evil that goes beyond just a megalomaniacal mustache-twirling supervillain that wants to destroy the world. The evil is much more personal and tragic, and that's what makes it all the more harder to watch. I've always believed that personal tragedies and personal connections are way more important than just numbers. It's the reason why a villain who destroys thousands of people's lives and kills God knows how many people can be redeemed, but a guy who mistreats his son and ruins him forever will always be a villain. Oh man, I can't wait for Tekken 8.
You are horrifying to look at.
The evil of Ernest and William is so tragic because it's so personal. This whole movie feels personal. I mean, it's 3.5 hours long, and every single minute of that runtime is spent painting a picture of a family that is being torn to shreds by their own actions. And there is a single moment in this movie that might be the most beautiful moment I've seen in a movie all year long, where Ernest has the opportunity to just tell the truth. He can tell the truth to the one person who needs to hear it the most, and for whatever reason, he can't do it. And I know I'm supposed to be the one that tells you the important thematic significance of every little thing that happens in a movie, but I can't figure out why he doesn't do it. I can't figure out what the movie's trying to say. Or maybe it's not trying to say anything at all. Maybe this really is just a movie about a husband who kills his wife's family, and then slowly poisons her until Todd Alquist shows up. The only thing I could possibly compare this movie to is Moby Dick. A grand story full of personal intrigue that can be taken so many ways, and is perhaps so steeped in metaphor and figurative language that it becomes impossible to tell what even is the story. Much like with The Holdovers, you can say that Killers of the Flower Moon is just another Scorsese movie. A movie that thinks it's better than it is and is just telling this very sloppy narrative about a husband trying and failing to take his wife's money. And while that might be what happens in the movie, I don't think that's what the movie's about. And honest to God, I can't tell you what the movie's about. This movie feels too personal to be guided by the invisible hand of a screenwriter. This movie feels too human to be a movie. And it also has the added benefit of having the best ending to any movie I've seen all year long. Even though this is my second favorite movie of the year, I feel like it's important to note that this is probably the best one I've seen. The only reason this movie's not first is because I have a personal responsibility to put one singular movie in the first spot. And on that note, it's kind of unfair to compare the rest of these movies to Suzume, because much like with Makoto Shinkai's other movies, this isn't a movie to me. Makoto Shinkai is the most personal filmmaker I've ever known. There's something about Your Name, Weathering with You, and now Suzume that feel personal. It's as if he was looking directly at me when he made these movies, because every era of my life can be broken up into one of these three movies now. My adolescence was defined by learning how to love others, learning how to take responsibility, and now learning to move on. Without getting too personal, I'd just like to say that the past couple of years have been very formative for me because I've finally moved away from home and I'm starting my new life. Everybody tells you that once you turn 18, you're officially an adult, but you never really feel like it. But after watching this movie, I felt like I finally was able to move on from who I used to be and can become who I'm supposed to be. Because out of all of the bad things that have happened in my life, it does get better. And Shinkai uses the 2011 Japanese earthquakes so beautifully to portray this message, creating a mystery box that we don't even realize is there until Suzume opens up her notebook. Just as a frame of reference, I was 9 when the Japanese earthquakes hit, so I don't really remember much about that time, but it's clearly very important, not only to Shinkai, but to the Japanese people. And in a way, this movie was just the perfect thing I needed to see when I saw it. A purposeful subversion of the cliches that Shinkai tends to fall into while still being drenched in his style. In a way, it reminds me of the greatest thing to ever exist, Kill la Kill. A purposeful subversion and parody of the archetypes that it still indulges in.
He's in, boys! He did it! He said it!
I mean, Shinkai heard everybody complaining about his young lovers and star-crossed lovers stories, so he turned the frickin' guy into a chair. And if you think that Suzume's about this love story, then I really don't think you understand what this movie is. Much like myself, Suzume is about growing up and moving on, and being able to look your younger self in the eyes and just tell them that things will get better is just like what Marty would say. Cinema. Plus, this movie has an enemies to friends romance between a nagging Japanese MILF and a funny jokester college student. So, you know, cinema.